My name is Elena Marsh, and I'm 37 years old. 14 minutes after the judge signed my divorce decree, my ex-mother-in-law called me from a number I'd deleted 6 months earlier and said, something no woman should ever hear after. She's already lost everything. Elena, please don't hang up. Caroline's voice shook in a way I'd never heard before. She didn't tell you, did she? About the hospital, about why the twins came early. I stood there in the courthouse parking lot, holding a folder of papers that ended my 8-year marriage, staring at a voicemail I'd ignored that morning from a woman I'd spent half a year trying to forget. And I understood in that instant that the betrayal I thought had destroyed me might have only been half the story. My name is Elena Marsh, and 6 months earlier, my husband, David, had called me from a hospital room to tell me that my younger sister, Rebecca, had just given birth to his twins. Both boys, healthy, due in December but born in September at 32 weeks. He said it like he was reporting a car. Accident, factual, unavoidable, already over. I was standing in our kitchen making coffee when he called, and I remember setting the mug down so carefully, as though the only thing I could control in that moment was whether or not the ceramic broke. Welcome back to Revenge Camera Stories, where the truth gets caught on film and quiet people stop staying quiet. We tell stories about people who documented everything, gathered the proof, and discovered that sometimes the worst betrayal isn't the one you know about, it's the one still hiding underneath it. Before I tell you what Caroline showed me in that parking lot, 2 things. First, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter, and your support helps them reach the people who need to hear them most. Second, drop your city, local time, and tell me, have you ever found out something that made you realize the betrayal was even bigger than you thought? Just yes or no in the comments. I read every single one. I'm in Durham, North Carolina, and it's 4 p.m. on a Thursday that smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet. Now let me tell you about the phone call that taught me the difference between the truth and the whole truth. Mrs. Marsh, this is Caroline Hastings, David's mother. I recognized her voice immediately, even though we hadn't spoken since the day I'd moved my things out of the house David and I had bought together 3 years earlier. A 2-bedroom craftsman with a porch I'd painted blue myself. One summer afternoon while David held the ladder and Rebecca brought us lemonade. Rebecca, my sister, 29 years old, a dental hygienist who still called me for advice about everything from car, insurance to whether a second date was worth it. The same sister who'd been sleeping with my husband for 14 months before. I found out who'd gotten pregnant somewhere around our 7th anniversary, who'd named the twins after our grandfather and our father without asking if I minded that our family names now belonged to children I would never be able to look at without feeling something sharp lodge itself in my chest. Caroline, I'm not doing this today, I said, my hand already moving toward the end call button. Please, she said, and her voice cracked in a way that made me pause. I need to show you something. Something Rebecca didn't tell you. Something she made David promise not to tell you. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? Not over the phone. Can you meet me? There's a coffee shop on Broad Street, near the courthouse. I'm already here. I looked at the divorce papers in my hand, at the signature that had just legally severed me from a man I'd loved since I was 24, and I thought about all the ways a person could be a fool. 20 minutes, I said. I found Caroline sitting at a corner table with a closed laptop in front of her, and a look on her face I'd seen before. At David's father's funeral 7 years ago, grief mixed with something harder, anger maybe, or shame. She stood when she saw me, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to do with our hands. We'd once been close in that tentative, hopeful way a woman is close to her husband's mother when she still believes the marriage will last forever. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. You have 10 minutes. She nodded and gestured for me to sit. When I did, she opened the laptop and turned it toward me without a word. On the screen was a scanned document, a hospital record, dated September 18th of the previous year. The header read, Durham Regional Medical Center, Obstetrics, High-Risk Delivery. I scanned the page. Rebecca's name, the twins' names, gestational age, 32 weeks, 4 days. And then halfway down, a section I almost missed. Delivery notes. Emergency C-section performed due to placental abruption. Following physical trauma. Patient admitted via ER after reported fall. Contusions and bruising consistent with... I stopped reading. What is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caroline's hands were folded tightly in front of her. 3 weeks before the twins were born. Rebecca showed up at my house at 11 o'clock at night. She had a black eye, Elena. Her wrist was swelling. She told me she'd fallen down the stairs at her apartment. I felt something cold settle into my chest. I didn't believe her, Caroline continued. I've been a nurse for 34 years. I know what a fall looks like, and I know what a fist looks like. Are you saying, David? I'm saying I took her to the ER myself that night. I sat with her while they did the ultrasound to check the babies, and I watched your sister lie to every doctor who asked her what happened. She said she tripped. She said she was clumsy. She said it so many times I think she started believing it herself. Caroline slid a second document across the table. A printed email, dated 2 days after the twins were born, from Rebecca Marsh, to Caroline Hastings. Subject, please don't. Caroline, I know you're upset, but you can't tell Elena about the ER visit. It was an accident. David didn't mean to. He was stressed about money, and the babies and everything with... Elena, it's over now. The twins are here and healthy, and we're moving forward. If you tell her, it'll just make everything worse. Please, let me handle my own family. I read it twice. She asked you not to tell me, I said slowly. And I didn't. I kept my mouth shut because Rebecca begged me to, and because I didn't want to believe my son was capable of... Her voice broke. But then the divorce went through, and I realized you were walking away without knowing the whole story, and that didn't sit right with me. I stared at the screen, at my sister's words, at the careful way she'd framed violence as stress, as an accident, as something that could be moved forward from without consequence. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you deserved to know 6 months ago, and because Rebecca is still with him, and those boys are growing up in a house where their mother covers bruises and calls it love. Here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever had that moment when you realized the person you were angry at was also a victim, and you didn't know how to hold both truths at the same time? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still here, drop a, so I know you're following this. I see every single one. I left that coffee shop with Caroline's laptop and a USB drive she'd prepared with copies of everything. The hospital records, the email, photographs she'd taken of Rebecca's bruises before they faded. Time-stamped and stored in a folder labeled with a date I would now never forget. I drove home to the apartment I'd rented after the separation. 1 bedroom with a window that overlooked a parking lot, and I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and opened my phone. I scrolled to Rebecca's number. My finger hovered over the call button for a full minute before I set the phone down. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I started watching my sister the way you watch someone you no longer know. Over the following 3 days, I went back through old text messages, old emails, old voicemails Rebecca had left me in the months before I found out about the affair. I was looking for something I'd missed, a crack in the script, a cry for help disguised as small talk, and I found it. April 14th, 7:42 p.m. Rebecca. Hey, can I ask you something weird? Me, always. Rebecca. If someone you love did something that hurt you but they said it was an accident, would you believe them? Me. Depends on the thing, why? Rebecca. Never mind. Just thinking out loud. June 3rd, 11:18 p.m. Rebecca. Do you think people can change? Like really change? Me, I think people can want to change. Actually doing it is harder. Everything okay? Rebecca. Yeah, just tired. Pregnancy brain. August 29th, 9:03 a.m. Rebecca. I'm sorry. Me. For what? Rebecca. For everything. For being a bad sister. For not knowing how to fix things. Me. Becca, what's going on? Rebecca. Nothing. Forget I said anything. I had read those messages 6 months ago and thought they were guilt. Guilt over the affair, over the pregnancy, over the family dinners she could no longer attend because I refused to be in the same room as her. Now I read them and saw something else. Fear. Isolation. A woman trying to say help without knowing how to form the word. I sat with that for a long time in the dark apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic, and I realized something that made my chest ache. I had been so focused on what Rebecca had done to me that I'd never once asked what was being done to her. I need to ask you something. If you found out that the person who hurt you was also being hurt, would you reach out to them? Or would you stay away to protect yourself? Drop reach out or stay away in the comments. I'm genuinely trying to understand what you would do. I called Caroline the next morning. I need to see Rebecca, I said. But not at the house. Somewhere David won't know about. She won't come, Caroline said carefully. She's barely left that house since the twins were born. David doesn't like her going places without him. Then we go to her. When he's at work. There was a pause. You're sure about this? No, I said. But I'm doing it anyway. Caroline gave me the address, though I already knew it. The same apartment complex where Rebecca had lived before the twins. Before David had moved in with her. Before everything had gone so completely wrong. I arrived at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, a time Caroline confirmed David would be at the office. She was already there, standing in the hallway outside Rebecca's door, looking older than I remembered. She doesn't know you're coming, Caroline said. Good. I knocked. The door opened a crack, and Rebecca's face appeared, pale and thinner than I'd seen it even at the hospital 6 months ago, when I'd shown up, against every instinct, to make sure the twins were okay. She saw me and froze. Elena, can I come in? She glanced behind her, a quick nervous movement, and then back at me. David's not here. I know, that's why I came now. She hesitated, then opened the door. The apartment was dim, curtains drawn, and it smelled like sour milk and something stale. The twins were asleep in a pack-and-play in the corner, 2 small shapes swaddled in blue blankets. Rebecca stood in the center of the room with her arms wrapped around herself, and I noticed for the first time the faint yellowish bruise along her collarbone, barely visible under the edge of her t-shirt. Why are you here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I set my bag down and pulled out the folder Caroline had given me. I opened it to the hospital record and held it out. Because your mother-in-law showed me this, and I need to know if it's true. Rebecca's eyes moved to the page, and I watched her face go from pale to ashen. She had no right, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. She had every right. You were hurt, Becca. You were pregnant and hurt, and you lied about it. It was an accident. Was it? She didn't answer. Her hands started to tremble, and she pressed them flat against her sides as though trying to hold herself together. How many times? I asked quietly. Elena, don't. How many times has he hurt you? He's not, her voice cracked, and she turned away, her shoulders curling inward. It's complicated. It's not complicated, Rebecca. It's abuse. The word hung in the air between us, sharp and undeniable. She sank onto the arm of the couch, her hands covering her face, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the twins. White noise machine. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said finally, her voice muffled. The affair, the pregnancy, any of it. It started as nothing, just attention when I was lonely, and then it became something I couldn't stop. And by the time I realized what I'd done to you, I was already pregnant and he was already... She stopped. Already what? Already different. Angry. He said if I told anyone, if I tried to leave, he'd make sure I never saw the twins again. He said no court would give custody to a woman who slept with her sister's husband, that I'd be seen as unstable, unfit. I felt something cold and sharp lodge itself in my throat. So you stayed. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice, Becca. You just didn't think you did. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I know you hate me. I know I deserve it. But please, Elena, don't make this harder. I'm trying to keep my kids safe. They're not safe, I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. Neither are you. Rebecca flinched. I knelt down in front of her, forcing her to meet my eyes. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because you're my sister and you're in danger. And I can't walk away from that even if I'm still angry about everything else. What do you want me to do? She whispered. I want you to let me help you leave. If you've ever had to help someone leave a dangerous situation, or if you've ever been that person who needed help, I want to hear from you. Drop a single word in the comments. What stopped you or what saved you? I'll read them all. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because this story isn't close to over. It took 2 more visits before Rebecca agreed. The first visit, she cried and said she couldn't leave, that David would find her, that the courts would take the twins. The second visit, I brought Caroline, who sat with Rebecca for 3 hours and walked her through exactly what a custody case would look like, what evidence mattered, and what Rebecca's rights were as a mother who documented injuries. You're not the villain here, Caroline told her. You're the victim, and the courts will see that if you let them. On the third visit, Rebecca packed 2 bags while David was at work, one for her, one for the twins, and we moved her into a safe house, run by a local women's shelter that Caroline had contacted. I didn't go with her. That part wasn't mine to do, but I did something else. I contacted a family attorney named Marissa Chen, a woman who specialized in custody cases involving domestic violence, and I paid her retainer with money. I'd been saving for a down payment on a house I no longer wanted. Marissa filed for emergency custody on Rebecca's behalf within 48 hours, citing the hospital records, the photographs, and a new piece of evidence, a ring camera from the apartment hallway that had captured audio of David shouting at Rebecca 3 weeks earlier, his voice loud enough to trip the motion sensor. The footage was grainy, but the audio was clear. "You think you can just leave? You think anyone's going to believe you over me? You're nothing without me, Rebecca. Nothing." The judge granted Rebecca temporary sole custody pending a full hearing. David's attorney tried to argue that Rebecca had instigated the affair, that she was emotionally unstable, that the injuries were self-inflicted. Marissa played the ring camera audio in open court. The room went silent. David's face went pale, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something in his expression that looked like fear. The judge awarded Rebecca full physical custody with supervised visitation for David pending a psychological evaluation and completion of a batterer's intervention program. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't justice in any clean, satisfying way. But it was safety. And for Rebecca, that was enough. 6 months after that courthouse hearing, I met Rebecca for coffee. Not at the place where Caroline had shown me the hospital records, but at a small cafe near the park where we used to go as kids, back when the worst betrayal either of us could imagine was borrowing each other's clothes without asking. She looked different. Her face had color again. Her hands were still. The twins were with Caroline for the afternoon, and Rebecca had just started a new job at a pediatric dental office across town, a place David had no connection to. "How are you?" I asked. "I'm okay," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "Some days are harder than others, but I'm okay. And the boys? They're good. Growing fast. They ask about their dad sometimes, and I don't know what to say yet. But I'm figuring it out." We sat quietly for a moment, and then Rebecca said, "I know I can't undo what I did to you. Elena, I know sleeping with David, lying to you, all of it. I know that broke something that might not ever be fixed." "No," I said. "It won't ever be the same." She nodded, her eyes filling. "But that doesn't mean we can't build something new," I continued. "Something honest. It'll take time. And I'm still angry. But you're my sister, and I'm not walking away from that again." Rebecca wiped her eyes and smiled. A small, fragile thing. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not. But the twins do. They deserve an aunt who shows up. And so I did. I started showing up for birthday parties, for pediatrician appointments Rebecca was nervous about, for the small, ordinary moments that make up a life. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely. But it was something. I still think about Caroline sometimes, about the way she'd sat across from me in that coffee shop and said, "You deserve to know." She'd risked her relationship with her son to give me the truth, not because it would fix anything, but because silence had already done enough damage. I think about the hospital record, about the bruises Rebecca had hidden, about the text messages I'd read as guilt when they were actually fear, and I think about the twins, who are 2 years old now, who will grow up knowing their mother chose safety over silence, even when it was hard. Here's the truth I learned at 37 that I wish I'd known at 29. Betrayal is never just one thing. It's layers, and sometimes the person who hurt you was drowning too. That doesn't erase what they did, but it changes what you do next. The hospital record, the ring camera audio, Caroline's pale face in that parking lot. That's my story. Now tell me yours. What's the moment you realized the person you thought was your enemy was also a victim? Put it in the comments. I read every single one. And here's what I really want to know. If you could go back and tell your younger self one thing about forgiveness, what would it be? One sentence. I'll read them all. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Revenge. Camera stories. Next week's involves a wedding video that revealed more than the bride intended. Document the truth, even when it hurts. That's protection too.